Hello everyone, this is Shannon from That's So Poe, and today I'm doing week 50 of my 2023 reads. This week I finished two absolutely fantastic books and a third book which was kind of a disappointment. Timestamps and content warnings are in the description box below. The first book I finished this week was Mammoths at the Gates by Nghi, which is the fourth book in the Singing Hills cycle, which is a series of novellas that are kind of Vietnamese-inspired fantasy. They are absolutely fantastic. I have reviews for the first two books in this series, The Empress of Salt and Fortune and When the Tiger Came Down the Mountain, so I'll link those below in case you're interested, but I love this series so much, and this fourth book really lived up to everything else in the series. So this follows the cleric Nghi as they go home to their monastery, and they haven't been back for quite a long time because Nghi is sort of a traveling monk, but they have to deal with some issues when they discover that the head of the monastery, somebody who was very important to them, has passed away. There are kind of grief proceedings happening, but there are also some northerners who have come who, before that head of the monastery was a monk, they were part of that person's family, and they kind of want to take the body back, but that's not how it works for monks anymore, and so there's a bit of conflict there. This, just like so many other books in this series, really examines the idea of stories that we tell, and this one is looking at the stories that we tell about people who have passed away. So the way we process our grief, the way that we remember them, the way that we sort of handle the complexities of who people are, because sometimes they act very differently with one group of people than another. They have mistakes, they've done bad things in their life, they've done great things in their life, and it's just like such a great exploration of that complexity of what is a person's life, and how do you remember them, and how do you process that, and how do you grieve. There's also a little bit of grieving over the changing of just places and people that you used to know when you were younger, as she is dealing with all the changes that have happened to the monastery. It is filled with really great themes, fantastic writing, I love the characters, and it's just such a wonderful read. So I highly recommend this. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I finished A Little Resurrection by Selina and Nwulu, which is a poetry collection that I heard about from Oliviah-Savannah at Olivia's Catastrophe. If you like poetry, you should definitely check out Oliviah-Savannah's channel because she just does the best reviews of poetry. I love all the poetry that she picks up, and she talks about things that I haven't heard anybody else talk about, such as this collection, A Little Resurrection. I'd never heard anybody else talk about it, but it is so fantastic. This is absolutely stunning poetry. It is all about sort of immigration and displacement, about sort of racism, about grief, about complex family relationships, and really has this theme of both death and resurrection. So there's so many ways that people die, especially, you know, how that relates to borders and displacement, and, you know, where you belong and where your body goes after you die, and how people grieve you, but also the sort of resurrection of all of this violence, especially against Black bodies, and the way that you can take joy and reclaim yourself. And it's just such fantastic theming, but also the shape of these poems is just beautiful. I love the wording, I love the imagery, I love the rhythm. It's exactly the kind of poetry that works for me. I really adored this. So I'm going to read you just a little excerpt from one of the poems, just so you get an idea of what it feels like in case it might appeal to you. I fear if I get out of bed on a day like today, each footstep will turn the floor linoleum, the smell of bleach returning to calcify my nostrils. I'll draw open my curtains onto the ward and be engulfed by the Morse code babble of machinery. So that's just a little excerpt from one of the poems, but it gives you an idea of the kind of imagery that's used and the rhythm and the feel of the poems. I loved this poetry collection. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. And if it sounds at all like something that's up your alley, I hope you give it a shot because I really loved this collection. And the last book I finished was I Shall Wear Midnight by Terry Pratchett, which is the 4th book in the Tiffany Aching sub-series of the Discworld overall series. This is a book that Sush, my husband, read out loud to me. We have really enjoyed the previous 3 books in the Tiffany Aching series, but this book was a bit of a letdown. I think that it still has a lot of the things that I like about Discworld, that I like about the Tiffany Aching series. It's got some really interesting characters. There's a new witch who's introduced in this one that I think is fantastic. You still have a lot of the characters from previous books that are making appearances, such as the Macneck Feagles. All these sorts of things are really great. But this one really, I felt, let it down in terms of the way that the story unfolded was very heavy-handed. There's some messaging in here that I didn't always agree with. For example, one of the big messages is this idea that if you want to be a real witch, you have to do everything on your own, and you can't, if you rely on your community for help, then that'll kind of diminish you in their eyes. Like, that was a huge part of the theming, and I'm like, I don't know about this, guys. There also is just a lot of heavy-handedness in terms of the monologuing. Characters constantly are monologuing about their beliefs, and it's very much the author speaking directly to you as the reader, but it gets a bit tedious and I don't always agree with it. And there's also just a lot of drama in this, a lot of interpersonal drama, a lot of angst, and a lot of weird characterizations, things that kind of contradict what was done in previous books and turned things in a different direction. And I just don't know that that worked for me. I think that there were some interesting things in here. There's some definitely interesting themes as well. Ideas of, the way that women are persecuted for being basically competent or smart or doing their own things, and people are afraid of them. So there's some interesting things there. And again, there's some neat characters that are introduced. But overall, this was a really frustrating book to get through. It was one of those things where if there weren't one more book in this series that I wanted to read, I think we would have DNF'd this, or maybe if we didn't already know Terry Pratchett, we would have DNF'd this because it just wasn't that fun. So I was pretty disappointed in this one, and I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars. Okay, so that is everything that I read this week. If you guys have read any of these books, if you're interested in them, if you've had a disappointing read recently, or if you've had some amazing new discoveries, such as A Little Resurrection, that was just so great, let me know in the comments down below. I would love to hear from you.